Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. I'd like to draw your attention. It's coming on. Thank you. Yeah. I'm Juliana Kerr. I'm the Director of Global Cities and Immigration here at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. To co-host this briefing with the National Conference of State Legislators. With the generous support from the MacArthur Foundation for both of our projects, and we've had the opportunity to collaborate many times over the past few years. So I'm really excited that we're actually bringing this conversation to a more public audience today. I want to thank the many state legislators that are here with us for this timely conversation, and especially our panel. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping notes. Our briefing is on the record. We are live streaming, so you can share the archived video. It'll be on the Chicago Council's website /immigration after this program. Please silence your phones, but you can join the conversation on social media. We have a Twitter handle that we're using. It's the hashtag NCSLimmigration. And our password and Twitter handles are available on the screens here next to us. I also just want to quickly draw your attention to a program that we're doing on Monday, June 19th. It's called Deep State, Persecution or Paranoia. We have Michael Glennon from Tufts University, Mike Lofgren was an analyst with US Congress, and it's moderated by Jerome McDonnell of WBEZ's Worldview. And then we take a break for the summer with our programming. I think we have a couple of other things in June. Otherwise, please check out our podcast, and we resume our programming in September. So turning back to this afternoon's briefing, I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. They're here for a private task force meeting they've been having yesterday and today, and this is going to be really fascinating to talk about state level policies with you. For those of you who are new to the council has provided for nearly a century an independent and nonpartisan platform for a variety of different voices to promote deeper global understanding and active U.S. engagement with the world. The views expressed by the individuals we host are their own and do not represent institutional positions or the views of the council. Now I'm pleased to introduce Senator Toy Hutchinson. Senator Hutchinson represents Illinois' 40th District in the Illinois Senate and serves as the Vice President of the National Conference of State Legislators. So thank you again for joining us, and please welcome Toy Hutchinson. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here with you. I am Vice President of NCSL, and all the task forces that we have really do an amazing job of getting legislators from across the country to share good ideas, be innovative, and show the world really what we are as states, which are those laboratories of democracy. So sometimes what we don't see at the federal level, the action really is at the states. And so when your participation in all these task forces like this are so very important. The Task Force on Immigration and the states at NCSL serves a critical role. States look at the challenges and opportunities of immigration to fill needed gaps and build strong communities, and are crafting innovative policies and programs. Common sense solutions are found in our states, and we encourage the federal government to take advantage of state experiences where we can do stuff that gets done. We see the impact that federal actions or inactions have in our home districts, our states, and across the country. I'll tell you that in the state of Illinois, we now have a population of foreign-born people of about 14%. In 1990, it was only about 8.3%. It has exploded. Given the realities of our federal political environment, there are a couple of things that we in the state legislature here have done. Right now, we're working on the Illinois Trust Act that has passed both chambers, and it's awaiting the governor's signature. But what it does is prevent law enforcement agencies to assist in immigration actions unless there's a warrant. What we don't want to keep having are people who are victims of crime or in the middle of something where they need law enforcement or first responder help, who are desperately afraid to call for it if they think that will entangle them in other immigration issues. It offers protections for schools, other safe havens designed to ease concerns of recent high-profile immigration cases and provide for better cooperation between law enforcement and immigrant communities. Again, we're waiting on the governor's signature on that. We hope we pray he signs that bill. Driver's licenses. We in Illinois allow immigrants to receive a temporary visitor's driver's license. That's now law. We had our own DREAM Act. We make scholarships, college savings, and prepaid tuition programs available to undocumented students who graduated from Illinois high schools. And that's law. We also have Another bill which aims to protect people who wear articles of clothing or have facial hair as a part of their religious practices from discrimination by their employer. That has also passed both chambers, and we're awaiting the governor's signature. I bring those things up to say that there are many people who are believe in the power of the legislature to do good and to affect change. And we're working across all spectrums to see if we can do that. So the issues being addressed at this task force, such as brain waste, refugee and immigrant integration, the role of the business community, faith leaders, and our elected officials, those are the conversations that can deliver practical, rewarding solutions for our communities, not only here in Illinois, but across the country. So I thank you for participating, and I hope you enjoy what it is you're about to experience in this live streaming event, anybody who's listening as well. This is a conversation worth having. It's a conversation that we all need to continue having, and I look forward to see what the recommendations of the task force are once we get to our summit in Boston. And can I give a little plug to the summit in Boston? But use the energy and the commitment that's in this room to do what you do best, and that's represent the people that you serve. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Terrific. Let me add my welcome, everyone. I'm Brian Hansen. I'm Vice President for Research here at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and really thrilled to have a terrific panel with me. Let me just briefly introduce the people who are here on stage with me. To my far left is Dave Heaton, who's a state representative from Iowa and a Republican. He's serving in his 12th term in the Iowa State House. And he is also the former president of the Iowa Restaurant Association, former board member of the Mount Pleasant Chamber of Commerce, and former co-chair of the Henry County Republican Party. He has served on numerous civic and professional organizations, including Kiwanis International, Henry County Pork Producers, Henry County Farm Bureau, and the Iowa Licensed Beverage Association. In addition to that public service, he also has served in the U.S. Army and is a former public school teacher, so has a great deal of experience to bring to this discussion. Next to him, we have State Senator Mo Dennis, who is from Nevada and represents the 2nd District of Nevada down in the southern part of the state. He has served on the he is President Pro Tem of the Senate and has served on the Finance Committee, the Revenue and Economic Development Committee, the Commerce, Labor, and Energy Committee. And as a state senator, the main issues of focus that he has had have included education, consumer rights, and the economy. Prior to his election to the Senate in 2010, he served 3 terms as the Nevada State in the Nevada State Assembly, and he helped found the Nevada Hispanic Legislative Caucus and served as its first chairman. Personal note related to the subject of this panel is that Senator Dennis is the son of immigrant parents from Cuba and was born in Brooklyn. He serves as one of the co-chairs of the NCSL's Executive Committee Task Force on Immigration and States. And then finally, right to my immediate left is State Senator Rene Garcia of Florida, Republican of Florida. And he is a state senator for the 36th district down in the southeastern part of the state. He serves as chair of the Senate Committee on Children, Families, and Elder Affairs, as well as vice chair of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Tax and Finance. He's a member of the Banking and Insurance Committee, the Judiciary Committee, and the Appropriations Subcommittee on General Government. Prior to his election to the state Senate, he served 4 terms in the Florida House of Representatives. He also is the son of immigrant parents from Cuba and was born and raised in Florida. He also is the former chair of the Health and Human Services Subcommittee and chair of the Health Policy, and brings with him an extensive background in healthcare. Senator Garcia serves as the other co-chair of the NCSL's Executive Committee Task Force on Immigration in the state. So we have a terrific panel of people with a tremendous set of experiences. And also, one of the things that I really appreciate about this panel is it represents different parts of the country. And I think in this conversation, we're going to get a chance to see how this issue looks from different parts of the country, as well as how different states are responding to the current situation. And as we all know, immigration has become a top priority on the national agenda and has been an issue of focus for many years. Up until recently, there was a frequently stalled effort at immigration reform. And then more recently, with this new administration, there has been a policy agenda to actively reduce the number of immigrants coming to the United States legally, and also to increase enforcement actions against undocumented immigrants who are already in this country. So that's the context in which we're having this discussion. And how I'd love to have you all start is by sharing with us what does immigration look like in your part of the country and in your states? Who are the immigrants who are in your states? Where are they located? What kinds of, how are they participating in the economy and society? And kind of how does this issue play out in your state? And Dave, if you don't mind, we'll start with you and your experience in Iowa.
Well, they're really not located in just, our major cities. They're scattered across our state. We have a large, a growing Hispanic population compared to other states. I would say that our Hispanic population is smaller than others, but it's brought some change to our state. We've had Bosnians come to our state. They're located in Waterloo and Des Moines. We have had the boat people come to us, to our state. Our former governor, Robert Ray, made an agreement with the federal government to open our doors of our state to the boat people of Laos and Vietnam years ago, and they've come to our state and scattered across the state and have been truly assimilated into our community. We have some Sudanese now that are starting to come in. And Des Moines just received 200 people from the Congo that resettled in our Des Moines area. So for what it's worth, I guess we can call ourselves a melting pot. We've seen, different groups come. But when you compare ourselves to our urban areas and our states like Texas with a significant Hispanic population, we're not there. But that's the status that we have now.
And just real quickly to add to that, are there certain economic sectors in which the immigrant population is focused?
Well, we have a very large pork processing industry in our state. We're the leading pork producer in the United States, and we process everything there. Our Hispanic population provides the labor force, I think, for our companies that do the processing. The other groups kind of scatter in and work elsewhere. I just want to say that we really think, I think the majority of our people in our state want a solution found to all of this. That I think a positive solution is what they're looking for. When I walk in my Central Park in my small community, I only come from a town of 8,000. But when I walk in the square in the evenings with my dog, there are several of the Hispanic families that are sitting in the park enjoying their families in kind of the European way or whatever, the Latino way. They don't sit at home and watch TV. They like to come out on the street, visit in the park. And you wonder, as you walk through these people, how many are here legally and how many are here not legally. They're all taking part in our community and providing services to our community. They rent apartments. Their kids go to our schools. everything seems to be real smooth. But yet we hear from the federal government and other people that are concerned about their presence, and it bothers me because these are just folks who are looking for a better life. And I just wish, as a politician, put a lot of work in over the years, and as an employer of owning a restaurant for 42 years, I had not only the Aleutians working for me, but also Hispanic people working for me. And I'm conscious of the insecurity that they live under, and I wish it would get fixed.
Terrific. We'll explore that more. Senator Dennis, coming from Nevada, what's the situation there? What's a brief kind of sketch of the immigrant situation in Nevada?
So in Nevada, our economy is really based on tourism. We have, I think, 6 or 7 of the top largest hotels in the world. They're in Las Vegas. So we depend a lot upon tourism, the convention industry, and we have a lot of immigrants that work in those fields. At the same time, we also work in, for the longest time, we're the fastest growing in the country, and we had a lot of construction work, which has slowed down over with the downturn. But I think that we're going to see going forward that we're starting to build again. They just announced that they're going to tear down one of the oldest hotels in the oldest part in my district in downtown Las Vegas. They're tearing out a whole block and building a whole new casino hotel there. And so we're starting to see those kind of projects that are coming up, some really big ones coming. So we know that that's coming forward, and many immigrants work in those fields. We are trying to expand into technology. We've got Tesla and others that have now moved. We're trying to expand into healthcare. We're opening up a brand new medical school at UNLV down in Las Vegas. So we'd like to tie into some of the biotech and that. So there's a huge need. We're going to have a huge need for workers, and immigrants have been a big part of that. Currently, the Hispanic community is the largest part of the immigrant community, which is about 25 to 27% of the population of Nevada. We also have, outside of the metropolitan areas in Las Vegas and Reno, is all agricultural. So whether it's cattle or sheep or they grow various crops. A lot of the immigrant communities participating there. So we've kind of got a mixture. We also have the mining industry that depending on the price of gold and other minerals, that has a lot of work available. So we have a huge need for workers, especially as we move forward, and immigrants have been a big part of that.
Sure. Thanks. And excuse me, Senator Garcia, Southern Florida. How do you view the situation in Florida with the immigrant population?
No, it's great to see, because Florida has a long history with immigrants, going back to the founding of Saint Augustine with Ponce de Leon, looking for the fountain of youth. I think we're still looking for that fountain of youth over there, by the way. And even through its whole history, going back to Miami, we know that there's a big Hispanic population there, but one of the first immigrants that landed in Miami was the Bahamians. And they're the ones that helped create the Flagler's rail line, the train line that comes into Miami and all over Florida. So there's been a great history. But what we see in Florida, it used to be very Cuban in South Florida, but now it's very cosmopolitan, very international. It's not just Hispanics. We have folks from all over South America and Europe. We see a lot of Europeans coming and settling in Miami, as well as you see the I-4 corridor area, where you see a lot of Puerto Ricans have settled up there. So it's a very dynamic, very robust immigrant population who have contributed in all sectors. And yes, we, like Nevada, we have a service economy, but we also have an agrarian economy in the central part of Florida, where immigrants have had continued to contribute to the growth and the expansion of that economy. And that's why it's important to make sure that we protect and help these individuals grow within our economy.
Terrific, thanks. The next thing I want to just get your sense for is that we hear in public debates a number of concerns raised about immigrant populations. Clearly, each of you three see the immigrant communities in your states as playing a very positive role. So I'd be curious about your reactions to some of these arguments. All of you have talked about the importance of immigrants to employment in your states. One of the concerns that's expressed by some is that immigrants actually take jobs away from people in the state. How do you see that playing out in your specific states? Anybody kick off?
I think in today's task force meeting, we heard something that was very telling, that we hear that it's the immigrant population is taking jobs away, but really, if you look at it, when you analyze it, we can say that it's technology and modern advancements. That's what's taking jobs away. So what we need to do is really find a way that we can re-educate the population, re-educate the workforce, and retrain the workforce for those new higher skilled jobs that are coming down that are there right now. So it's not necessarily the immigrant population who's taking these jobs. I think it's really the new high tech jobs, or the tech jobs, yeah, that's really taken.
Well, yes, as everything's become automated.
Automated, that's right, the automated, thank you.
That takes jobs, so that the jobs are being created on the technology side. But,
Right.
some of these small communities across the country especially are losing jobs. And, in many cases, they're blaming the immigrant when in actuality it's technology. We just recently had some studies done from the task force working with some national partners that actually looked at that issue. And when you look at the types of jobs that immigrants fill, in some instances, they may be taking some jobs perhaps that a high school student, whether it's working in a restaurant or that kind of thing. But for the most part, they're really filling a need for things that are needed, not so much taking jobs away from other individuals. And once again, it comes back to that technology thing. That's really where the industry is heading towards that. And so that's where we need to build up our workforce.
Yeah, in Iowa, how do you see it?
Well, I think that basically our immigrant population are doing a lot in the low-skilled jobs area. I know that they do work that our regular citizen that resides in our state probably wouldn't want to do. But these people are coming here to better their lives, and they are willing to step up and do this kind of work to move their lives and their family that they have with them ahead. They work hard. They're highly productive at what they do. And we have, in the next year and a half, 2 pork processing plants that are going to come online that are going to need 1,500 new workers in each one. And I don't think that the average Iowan is going to be standing in the employment line waiting to get a job. These new Americans are going to be there, and they're going to allow these pork processing plants that are going to process 10,000 hogs a day. That's 20,000 total of new production. They're going to make it happen. And we're glad that they're there. And right now, I don't know where the other 3,000 are going to come from. Because to me, I think most of my people in our state that are here at immigration status are employed. So we're looking for more new people to come to our state, and we're going to welcome them. You bet.
It's interesting. So immigration actually tied to economic growth and a driver of economic growth in some of these stories. Another concern, and it gets often raised at a state level, is that immigrants coming in are economically costly in terms of service provision and all. How do you view that? What's your experience with?
So let me start with that. We see that people talk about that, what's the cost? Of course, we've had studies done on that also, but I think if you just think about it, in Nevada, if you have an immigrant come in to do construction work or any of the types of work that we didn't have to educate them, right? So it's a ready workforce that's coming, that's going to be trained in specifics of that particular company, but they're ready to work, right? So do we pay for the children to be trained? We do. So there's a cost associated with that, but we didn't have a cost associated with the parents. And I think that, as you look forward, these kids are being trained in the types of things like STEM and other things that we're going to need workers for, which currently right now, we've got companies building outside of the U.S. to fill that need because we can't bring in the workers. And so, and also in Nevada, we don't have a state income tax. So it's sales tax and property tax, but when I go to the store, nobody asks me if I'm a U.S. citizen when I'm buying a pair of shoes, or whatever, because everybody pays it. And so in Nevada, we're all working together, and the studies that we've seen actually show that the immigrant actually spends more of their income. And so economically, it's a great economic driver in Nevada.
And it's the same story we have in Florida. We have a sales tax. We have no corporate or income tax. We do have a corporate tax. We don't have an income tax in Florida. And the reality is that the immigrant population contributes a lot more than they actually get back in services. And when you see the history that they've had in Florida, they're very proud people. They want to take care of themselves. They don't want government to take care of them. And you see that through the work ethic that they have and how they take care of their families. And they really don't want handouts. They just want to be treated like everyone else. So it really is. I think it's if you look at all these studies that have been conducted across the country in every state, I think the net impact of the immigrant population has always been a positive. It's just that the narrative always seems to think that it's negative. It's taking more and more away from the state coffers. And when we look at the undocumented population, if you think about that for a minute, a lot of the services that individuals claim that they are receiving, it's not necessarily true, because a lot of the federal guidelines that are in place prevent them from receiving these programs. And then at the end of the day, they are still paying taxes. They're still paying their taxes, and we're still receiving those taxes from them. So the net positive, there really is a net positive, even from the undocumented population that are in our respective states. So it's really the narrative that needs to change, and I think a lot of it has to do with the education that we have to go down and educate the population and to that positive experience of the immigrant population.
We fight that in Iowa a lot, the thought that they're drawing down federal resources, state resources, and that's just not true, especially with undocumented. As far as I'm concerned, in my town, they're all working. And I guess if their income's not quite enough and they're here as a citizen, or they are here legally in this country, if they need food stamps, we'll give them food stamps. They're no different than anybody else. They're entitled to. And that's okay. But we get a lot of criticism, and I don't see them taking advantage of our safety net situation at all. They're hardworking people. They just want to get along, pay their rent. I mean, all these people that build these apartment houses and everything, they're paying rent, and they're paying rent at a cost that is even actually higher than it is to own a home. You can deduct the interest on your home, can't you? But you can't deduct the rent. Our people that are paying rent are paying for the cost of living at a higher rate than the people that own their own homes, when you look at it that way.
It's very helpful to get that perspective. As Senator Hutchinson pointed out in the beginning of her remarks, is that the federal discussion has left states in many ways in the lurch. We've got this set of unaddressed issues, first with the lack of action on immigration reform, and now there is an agenda that's actually pushing hard against immigrant populations in this country. How does that affect states? What are the implications of both the inaction at the federal level and the more recent policies for states? Does that create challenges for you all, and kind of what is the nature of some of those challenges?
Well, by the federal government not taking action, it forces all of us in our states to come up with ideas, innovative ways of trying to at least address the issue that we have before us. And a lot of it has to do with different policies from healthcare, education, economic development, and so forth, and that the federal government just seems to ignore. And it shouldn't be left up to the states. It really is a federal issue that should be addressed. But the inaction between Republicans and Democrats of being able to come together, sit around a table, and come up with a comprehensive immigration plan that works for all of us is really putting that burden on all of us at the state level, which forces us to come up with, for us, for example, we just passed in-state tuition for our university for the undocumented individuals in our state. Students, and it makes all the sense in the world, because if you think about this for a minute, we spend the money from K through 12 educating them, and then all of a sudden, from when they graduate, we say, well, you should not partake in the American dream. So then it's going to cost us taxpayer money if they have to provide any services to these individuals. So then why not allow them to be able to partake in the American dream by going to college and having ability to pay for in-state tuition, as opposed to having to pay 3 or 4 or 5 times more for an education that you and I will take for granted. And that in itself is a direct investment into our economy that the immigrant population is having. And those are some of the issues that at the state level that we have to address and deal with.
Yeah, what are some other examples of challenges that you face?
So, we've seen states do various things. So even on a public safety issue, I know in Nevada we have individuals that are driving without a driver's license. We wanted everyone to be safe, and we wanted everyone to have insurance, and so we passed the driver's authorization card based after a similar law that was passed in Utah. We currently have 36,000 individuals that have those that are driving around and have passed the test and are doing the things that they want to do those things. We just have to give them opportunity. But that's one example of the federal government not putting in place some kind of comprehensive immigration policies so that those individuals could get a regular driver's license. And other states I've seen in Utah where they want to bring these businesses, as the representative has talked about, they want to bring businesses, but you got to have workers. And they've actually asked permission of the federal government if they could start to register these individuals and use them and give them work permits, and which they haven't received.
At the state level.
At the state level, trying to do basically comprehensive at the state level, and so those are the kind of things that states are having to try to do. And on the opposite side of that, because nothing is happening, we're the ones that a lot of times end up with the bill. Whether it's it's someone that they want us, that ICE comes in and wants you to hold, and then they leave them there longer, and then you end up having to pay for it. You don't ever get reimbursed. These kind of costs are costs that are direct costs to the states that aren't getting reimbursement for the federal government, and yet we're just trying to do everything we can to make to prosper as a state, bring that economic impact. Senator Garcia talked about the kids that they're going to school. In some cases, we're seeing some of these kids go all the way through. They can't get a job, and so they're going back to other countries with all this knowledge that we've invested in them, and they're starting companies there in those countries. So we're really, that's what they call the brain drain, where we're basically giving them all they need to succeed, and then telling them, see you later. And we think that something needs to happen so that we can keep those kids here, and the ones that are here, be able to have them actually work with the education that they have, and not just take any job, but be able to take some of these higher tech jobs that we need.
That's where Iowa really kind of pays a price too. We have a lot of Chinese people, Chinese students, come to our 3 Regents institutions and the rest of our private schools in the state. These young people are highly educated. They're from the new middle class in China, and their parents want them to receive an education in some of the best schools in the country. And so they send them to America. But the problem is that the policies of our federal government will not allow our economy to take advantage of these highly skilled people when they graduate in their respective fields at our schools and our universities. Our doctors that are trained here have 27 months at the max after they've graduated to practice here, and then if they, in a lot of instances, they got to leave. If they meet an American citizen and get married, perhaps they'll be able to stay. But we're paying a great big price. Our economy's paying a big price because we just are turning our back on a tremendous resource staring us in the face. We could billions and billions and billions of economic activity we're losing because they have to go back home. Too bad.
One of the things that's interesting hearing you tell stories about the states and the concerns is that it sounds like at the state level, the politics is different on immigration. At the federal level, it's very polarized. And I would be interested in hearing, because each of your states have different compositions, partisan compositions and others in terms of rural urban populations and all. What is the nature of support for the kinds of measures that you're talking about that your states have done? Who is supporting? No doubt any legislative proposals have opposition, but what are those coalitions that are forming in your states to address these issues?
I think in our state really is the Chamber of Commerce and agriculture. They get it. And they're the ones that have pushed a lot of these policies forward in our state. And look, I'll be remiss to say that, is it polarizing in Washington? Yes, it is polarizing in Florida as well. There's no doubt that you have both extremes, and within the Republicans and Democrats. It's not just one party over the other. It really is across the board. It's just depending on where people come from or their ideology. And what we have in Florida, we call them blue dog Democrats. Those sometimes tend to be more right of me. And it's just based on where they come from and what their ideology is. But the reality is that it really has taken some time in Florida to try to educate individuals to the point where they're starting to have some of these conversations. We've been trying to pass in Florida the driver's license bill. And to me, it only makes sense to be able to make sure that individuals can have a driver's license so they can get from point A to point B. And if you don't believe in the humanitarian aspect of it, right, to make sure that people can work and provide for their families, just think about the economic impact of it. So now in Florida, in order to have a car, you have to have insurance, car insurance. And you can't get car insurance if you don't have a driver's license. They're still driving. So when you get into an accident with one of these individuals that doesn't have a driver's license, they don't have driver's insurance. So that means it's coming back to you, to your insurance company to pay. So if it's not on the humanitarian side or to do the right thing, think about the economics of it. And we've been trying to get this done in Florida for the last couple of years. I presented the bill. We haven't been able to get it to the finish line. That's why we're looking at what Nevada has done and other states have done to see if we can try to finally get that bill passed this year. So it's tough, but at least every year in Florida, I can say, it hasn't been as rough as it has been in other states. For example, we see what's been happening in Texas, and we've had that conversation today in our part of our task force. It's a majority state, and yet you see how polarizing it's become, the issues in Texas, and it's really unfortunate that some of our friends in the state legislature in Texas don't understand the real impact and positive impact that the immigrant population has had not only for our country, but more important for Texas.
And I think we've seen, a lot of the polarizing we've seen because some of the districts are highly either Democratic or highly Republican, and so people, they think about that when they're looking at policies. And so do the vast majority of people want something done versus what do the elected folks want? And so that's kind of difficult sometimes, because when we passed the driver's authorization card 5 years ago in Nevada, we had bipartisan support, both Republicans, Democrats. The governor was Republican; he signed off on it, and because it was the right thing to do. And yet, if we would have done it this particular session that we just got done finishing last week, I don't know that we could have got it through this time because there's just the dynamics in politics has just changed. In fact, we even had one individual that wanted to take the database of these 36,000 individuals now and wants to give that over to the federal government so that they can deport them. That's going backwards, right? But yet that was a political statement that was being made that didn't go very far because there's not enough support to do that type of thing in Nevada. But I think that there is support out there. I think, as was mentioned before, the business community is stepping forward because they're realizing if they're going to expand that they need to have a workforce. They need to have individuals. And every time you expand anything, you're going to need more folks, not just in, if we build a hotel, for example, in Las Vegas, that means we're going to need more schools because now we have more people working in the hotel and we need more grocery stores, we need more. So all of that, and so the business people are really looking at all of that now and saying, hey, we really need to pay attention to that. So we're getting more and more support from the business community. And in my mind, I've always thought that that's really the one piece that needs to happen, that people need to talk about the economic impact on business so that we can have a true discussion about immigration.
Our commodity groups like Farm Bureau, our other commodity groups like Soybean Association, corn growers, pork producers, all those industries that revolve around whether or not we have enough people to run these pork production plants and provide the value added that on our crops that we so desperately want, they see the light and they are talking about we need change. We're not there yet because I don't think we're getting enough pressure from the academic community who are having all these students come to our state to get their college education, nor are we getting enough pressure from the industries in our state who so desperately need to grow and have these people with high skills to allow them to grow. We need that other element. And then I think our legislature will respond. I'm not so sure that the majority party, whoever it is, or now it is maybe going to be unanimous in passing this legislation. When you look at Washington, D.C., you have a minority within the majority controlling the majority because they've got just enough votes. You got to have them or you can't get the party to vote all the way on something. We're kind of a microcosm of that too. We have moderates in our party and we have conservatives in our party, my Republican Party. Sometimes it seems as if it needs to be an open vote and provide the common sense that I think our basic population out there wants us to show and do this thing in a bipartisan manner and move on. And I put that request to the federal government also. We can't continue to just be frozen in time. Whether you're conservative or a liberal, you have to advance. You can't go backward. And we're at a point, like at least my state is, and I think our federal government is, we're at a point where it's almost like we're frozen in time and it's time to move on.
So one of the opportunities at an event like this, where you have people from all over the country meeting together, is there's an opportunity to share experiences, share stories of what has been successful in other places. And we've had a chance to hear from each of your states things that have been going on. I'd be curious, is there an idea or two that has struck you in talking to your colleagues from around the country, which you see either as a really interesting development that contributes to the mosaic of states as laboratories, whether or not it might work in your state or not and be feasible? But what are some of the other ideas that you've heard that have struck you that other states are pursuing?
Well, I think that a couple things that I've noticed, and especially, and I've been on this task force now for like 12 years and seen the difference between then and now. I think a lot more legislators are having discussions. Regardless of party, they're looking at what's happened over the last few years. Whether it's in Alabama where they had crops that were rotting in the fields because they passed some anti-immigration laws and realized that, well, maybe we need to back off that a little bit. And so people are looking at those kinds of things that have happened and saying, maybe we need to have a discussion about, what's really going on here. And I think part of that is because more and more people, I think you mentioned it earlier, that somebody knew somebody. When you know somebody who's an immigrant and what they've done, I think that changes you a little bit in trying to understand where we need to go with this, because you get to see the human side of that. The second part is, I think and I mentioned this earlier, was with business and where they're at, and also realizing that their future plans rely on having workers, and where are we going to get that. One of the studies that we've seen shows that the population as a whole is growth is not going down, and yet we're living to be older and older. The average life age lifespan is getting bigger, and so where are we going to find those? I mean, if we got more people that are living longer and less people being born, how are we going to fill that niche? And I think everybody's looking at all of that, and so we're seeing that with business and others. So I think those two areas are areas that I think that have been impressed me, that give me hope that something can be done.
Right, and the great thing with this task force is that before it was just the immigration experience was New York, maybe Florida, California, and maybe Texas, but you realize now that it's not just those border states. Immigration affects everyone in this country, whether it's illegal or illegal or refugees, refugees resettlement programs, whatever the case may be. The states have to get engaged, and it goes back to what we originally talked about. Well, because the federal government isn't doing their job, isn't meeting their responsibility, so the states have to do that, and it's great to sit down with our colleagues from different parts of the country and see what's going right and what's going wrong. I'll tell you, I mentioned Texas. That's something that we definitely don't want to see what happened in Texas happen in any other state. And it's really pretty much deputizing to a much extent local enforcement and allowing people to go after and asking for their documents, and that's something the courts are going to have to settle. And I truly believe that the courts are going to rule on the side of the plaintiffs, I guess, on that side. So those are experiences that we learn from each other, and make sure that we try not to make those same mistakes in our respective states, and try to learn from the positive that's happening. And especially as it relates to education issues and making sure workforce development and the contributions that the immigrant population have contributed in everyone's state, and we see how great it is. It's just a matter of coming together and having these conversations and exchanging these ideas, and going back to our states. And our friend from Georgia, we've been talking about, everything that we come up with, we have this dialogue, interchange, and we take it back to our respective states, and we present these legislation that hopefully we can get passed. And if it doesn't get passed, at least we have these conversations, and hopefully move the needle in the right direction.
One of the ideas that I picked up today, or yesterday rather, was establishing centers. I think the label was Centers for New Americans or something like that. When the boat people came to Mount Pleasant, we had 3 families that came. And each one of them went to a church. A church reached out to each family, 3 churches, provided them with stability, clothing, helped them establish a place to live. If they needed furniture or whatever they needed, they would find furniture and things to set their lives up. And then they provided mentorship to these people. So they assimilated into the community very, very well. We need to do more of that. I think as these people come to our communities and take their jobs and attempt to establish themselves in the community, we should be reaching out with open arms. And I think the one effort that I saw, I can't remember the state I tried to remember when you were getting to me. I couldn't. Comes with age, I guess, or years in the house. But anyway, I think they invested something like $750,000 in establishing some of those centers across the state. And I'd like to see us do that in Iowa too. I think it's a good idea.
Perfect. Well, I want to bring the audience into this conversation, and I just want to mention, if you'd like to be recognized, to just raise your hand. I'll call on you. We've got microphones in the room to be able to make sure that people listening online can capture your question, and also there's a possibility of asking questions electronically. So particularly those of you who aren't in the room, if you open your web browser and go to chi.cnf.io, you're able to ask a question, and I've got all the questions right here, as well as vote on questions that others have asked. You in this room are welcome to do so as well. And just one more time, it's chi.cnf.io. And with that, let me turn to the audience to extend the conversation. Yes, there's a woman right here, please. Here comes a microphone.
I am dead impressed by this panel, and I'm comforted as a citizen to hear that you, who are Republican and Democrat, coming from three very different parts of the country, perhaps the only one, the major one that's missing is Rust Belt. I haven't heard any disagreement among you. You all are looking at the multiple facets of immigration, everything from higher education to industries that no one else, that American citizens don't tend to want to work in, to school. You've all heard them, I don't have to repeat them. And your pragmatism and humanitarian interests are striking. Are you outliers? I'm serious. It's you talk about the federal government, but it is not monolithic. It's not a monolith. In fact, it is made up of representatives from each of the states and Republicans and Democrats. Why? I have the feeling if I locked you in a room, you could come up with a good immigration policy without killing each other. Why isn't this happening at a national level?
Well, I think that, well, in actuality, the task force in the last 12 years actually has come up with policies that we have shared with Congress, that we have come to an agreement that we all agree is good policy. And we actually saw some of that in what the Senate passed, the U.S. Senate passed just a few years back. A lot of that same policy that they had were things that we had worked out over the last few years. I don't know if we're outliers. I think one thing that we learned this morning that I hadn't thought about is that many of the representatives come from areas where perhaps they don't have a lot of immigration, and they're going to have a totally different view of how immigration impacts them. Those are places in the country where perhaps jobs are going away. They don't have a lot of immigrants, but they're thinking that the immigrant's the one that's taking the jobs away. And so those are the ones that are harder to be able to have a discussion with because they don't have the experience that perhaps we have because we work with immigrant populations in our communities. But I wouldn't say that we're outliers in that. I think that especially legislators, especially at the state level, I think we're willing to sit down and talk about issues. Even though we may not agree on everything, there are certain key things I think that we can agree on, and I think that's what's brought us together. And when we have these meetings, even at the national level, and many folks that come are able to hear that and be able to have a discussion about it at least, because that's the biggest hurdle that we have is to be able to just sit down and talk. So I think it's changing, and I think that there are enough out there that we're not necessarily outliers.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening in Washington, is that people don't want to sit down and have a conversation. We're too quick to retreat to our corners and to our talking points, as opposed to be a little bit more pragmatic about what is best for the country. And that's what's in the States. It's a little different because we have to deal with each other. We have to work with each other. We have to fix our own problems. We may disagree with it. We may disagree with some of the policies that may be presented in our state legislature in Tallahassee with Republicans and Democrats, but at the end of the day, it's all us. It's up to us. And I think that's the difference between state legislatures and in Washington, D.C. We retreat to our corners, but we realize, wait a minute, we got to fix this, because if we retreat to our corners, nothing's going to happen. And that's what you see, at least that's my experience in Florida, where, and more so in the Senate, where Republicans and Democrats sit down, have conversations. We may beat each other up on the floor, but at the end of the day, we realize that we have to move the agenda forward to make our state a better place. And I think part of the problem that we have is that we see in Washington is the redistricting and how redistricting is done. And until we don't start addressing the issue of having more fair districts across the country, you're going to see these districts are going to be more packed with Republicans or packed with Democrats. And then at that point, those individual congressmen and women, we're just going to really cater to a monolithic voter or demographic, as opposed to individuals that share different ideas. And that's what I think is lacking in Washington, D.C. And that's wishful thinking on my part, right? Because that's the biggest problem that's been plaguing our political history, has been the gerrymandering of congressional districts.
Yeah, we're all here for pretty much for the same reason. The members of our task force are all advocates for positive change in our immigration policy, whether they're national or whether in our state. But the division you talk about occurs when we return to our states and start to work toward some changes in legislation to address this. And then the resistance rises up, and you have to deal with that and do everything you can to convince a majority to move it forward. That's where the challenge is. And we're all on the same page. Now, I want to talk a little bit. I'm going to put a pitch in for you guys. We do our reapportionment by computer. It's just all about people. We've got 100 representatives, and we have 3 million people in our state. Ring-a-ding. You start the computer, it goes up into one corner and measures out districts that have 30,000 people in each. Take it, and you can pass the first one or reject it. But the next time the computer goes into play, it's take it or leave it. And we don't have a lot of problems. And we have a lot more balance in our districts. They're more homogeneous. We leave it up to a third party that we can't even talk to. And we get the job done. You guys ought to try it. Try it. Do an experiment and see how it comes out.
Well, I think in Nevada, though, I don't think we have that issue with the gerrymandering so much. Individuals just tend to live in certain areas, so sometimes you end up with those districts.
It's hard
but
to.
But we did a similar thing where we didn't try to move the lines around too much. We tried to keep them. But as you look across the country, though, there are some places where they definitely have packed individuals in a certain way, and that will impact the way that they're going to go to Washington, D.C. to legislate, and even at the local level, for that matter.
Right here, please.
Hi, thank you. I'm Eben Cathy. I'm the Regional Program Director at Upwardly Global, and we help connect foreign-trained professionals to jobs in their skill sets here in the United States. And we actually do work in all of your states, and we do a lot of work in Florida. So I wanted to say thank you for your comments about immigration and the economy, and also want to point out that we connect people with jobs in engineering, in IT, and all kinds of professions that I think people assume are full, but there's a lot of jobs out there that just aren't being filled, and immigrants fill those jobs. So thanks for your thoughts on that. My question was about the resistance. So I think that you're all kind of agreeing that you see immigrants as assets to the United States and to our economy. I'm wondering that right now, with the rhetoric that we're hearing in Washington and all over the U.S., is what you're hearing at home different now? Are you hearing different kinds of things from your constituents that you weren't hearing 2-3 years ago? If so, what are you saying? Because you're such great advocates. How do you talk to people that don't see immigrants as assets in your community?
So we just got done with session in Nevada, and I actually proposed an office for new Americans, similar to one, I think there's one in New York, they have one in Michigan, or in Chicago also, in the governor's office. I didn't do enough work with all of the stakeholders to get that through this time, and there was also some costs associated with it, and it was going to be in the governor's office, and we didn't have enough discussion there. But the emails that we got was, oh, you're just trying to help illegal immigrants. They don't want to even accept the fact that we've got many immigrants. And I talked about Hispanic immigrants in Nevada, but we have a lot of Asian immigrants that come in. We've got Filipinos that come in. We've got all kinds of immigrants that come into Nevada, and to try to help in some of those instances, like you said, an engineer or a doctor or a tech, that we want to keep them there and to try to create that office. So they're still out in the public, at least in Nevada, a lot of individuals that feel like we're just trying to help the undocumented. As opposed to looking at what the overall picture is. So those of us that have that vision of how immigrants can be helpful continue to try to do that. And I think we eventually get there, but there's just still a lot of angst out with some people when you try to talk about these particular types of proposals.
And that's why I think it's important to have the conversation. And forums like these go a long way to moving that needle, right? To have that conversation and go back to our respective districts. Fine, I'm safe in my district, but sometimes when I go out to Central Florida, I'll have the conversation, try to explain and educate. I think the lack of education or interaction maybe with immigrant populations, whether they be refugees or whether they be exiles or whether they be undocumented, whatever the case may be, the fact that they have not had an experience with these groups, maybe that's what stems some of these conversations and rhetoric that you hear across the country. And that's why it's so imperative that we go into these communities and have these conversations and educate individuals as to the important impact that the immigrant population has had in our country. And then, for God's sakes, then I have to stand up and look at me. The U.S. born, my parents are Cuban, and I think I turned out pretty good, so I'm a perfect example of what education can do for our immigrant population. I'm the first one in my family to go to school, much less have a master's. And now serving as a state senator in the state of Florida, one of the largest states in the country, it's pretty indicative of what we can do if we do have a robust immigrant population. Instead of holding them back, help them move up. And as they move up, everyone else goes up as well. So that's what we have to do. And I think that's part of my job, even as a Republican, to go out and educate individuals and let them know of the positive impact of the immigrant population in our country.
I was in a position right now where we have to just kind of nibble at the edges and move forward on things that make things better, makes life better for our immigrant population, and especially the kids. We had a court case here 2 weeks ago. Our Iowa Supreme Court voted in favor of the illegal immigrant who had a fake ID and held that the prosecution went to the wrong court. They should have went to federal court on the issue rather than going to the state court because of preemption. And so they threw the case out. Well, it lit a fire, that's for sure, because all of a sudden those people misinterpreted what the decision was really all about. It was a technical thing, not a decision of whether it was right or wrong. It was on a technicality. And so we have a feeling around the state now to fix that. And And we had an issue in the legislature this year. We had Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, city councils threatening to create sanctuaries. And that didn't go over very well with the conservative in my party either. So best maybe to let things cool off a little bit on that issue. The issue didn't get to the floor because, as I was talking about, the minority rules the majority. Well, there were enough votes in my caucus to discourage the leadership from coming forward with that bill because they weren't going to get the votes, even though the Senate sent it over to us with a big vote. So that stopped. But underneath all this is this feeling that, I can talk about economy, needing for jobs and everything, and that people understand that. They forget all about it. But the issue of things like sanctuaries and driver's licenses is just not the time. Even though our neighbor Nebraska put through a bill that allowed those driver's licenses. It just isn't playing in our state right now. I'd rather think about the future and the kids, the children of these people. And what are we going to do to promote these kids and give them educational opportunities so they can share in America and the good jobs and opportunity that can be there for them with higher skills? That's what I'm looking for.
Terrific. I want to follow up by asking a question that's one of the most popular questions here on the online poll, which looks at this issues of politics. And it asks, how do you think the immigration issue is going to play out in the 2018 campaign or forward? We've just heard one possibility is backlash, right, concern. Another argument that's raised by the questioners is, do you expect increased immigrant turnout to actually shift politics in your state? Kind of prognosticating a little bit, how do you see this playing out in each of your states?
No one knew what was going to happen. If we knew what was going to happen in the last election, we'd all be millionaires, right? We're not taking bets on that, but I think it's going to be very tough to tell. A lot of folks are saying, Republicans are going to pay a big price in the next election cycle. I truly think that it really depends on how, if finally Washington comes together and does something. But the reality is, as it relates to the states and what's happening in the states, I think it's indicative that the states are taking the bull by the horns and saying, listen, we have to start addressing these issues. And as it relates to us in Florida, that conversation is being had at all levels, even with our governor, Republican governor, who's a very conservative governor, but understands the reality and the need to make sure that we move this conversation, have policies in place that really don't give them an extra hand, but at least treat individuals fairly and give them an equal opportunity as it relates to job placements and schooling and economic empowerment. And that's the goal that we want to make sure that we try to accomplish, is make sure that it is an equal playing field for everyone, not give someone a hand up over someone else. And that's what I think the whole goal of the conversation is. As it relates to elections, I have no idea how that's going to play out. But we'll keep on working at it.
Well, and 2018 is, in politics, it's a long
time away.
Long time away. However, if you look at Nevada in this last, we were kind of the oddball, I guess, nationally as far as the election and who won, and we actually completely flipped. The legislature had gone from being Republican 2 years earlier, completely, including a Republican governor, to flipping back to the Senate and the Assembly being Democrat, and voting more. And part of that was because of this anti-immigrant rhetoric got the immigrant community up in arms, and they got out, and 20% of the vote in Nevada was Hispanic vote. And many of these are individuals that are permanent residents, whose families had immigrated here and gone through the full process, but they were just upset at the way people were talking about immigrants. throughout the process. So if that's any indication of what, what's going to happen in 2018, I think it can be, with us being that outlier this particular time, I think that's going to happen unless the dialogue changes.
Well, as far as,
Next.
I can't really add to anything you guys have already said, that's for sure. But I know that the number of Hispanic population in our state is not significant enough yet to really make a difference. It will, for at least another election or two, go on with the way, the count, the influence, the way it is, even though they'll continue to grow and become a bigger factor in the long run. Yeah, people are, the whole issue of secure the borders, whether it's a wall or whether it's more law enforcement, that's what's on my people's mind. I think where the real debate that I want to have is, well, are you ready to load buses and take all these people back home? Where? We don't know. Or are we going to look for a solution on how these people can stay and find security? I know that 64% in the poll we had before the election, 64% of the public in Iowa want that to happen. They don't want people to be sent home. They want to stabilize the population, but they just want to prevent more from coming illegally. And I think if we can carry forward with that emphasis, then I think that we can move forward a little more positively if we keep that kind of line of dialogue.
The only thing I'll add to that is that, for sending them home, this is their home. And they've made...
Oh, I'm sorry I said it.
No, I know, but I'm saying the U.S. is their home, and that's the narrative that I think that a lot of folks, even in my own district, even when some Cuban Americans are believe, some will say, send them home, but it's not. They've been here, their children are here, their families are here. There is no doubt that we need border security, whatever that border security may look like. I'm not much in favor of a wall, but we have to control our borders. No doubt that when you poll Americans, everyone thinks we should have some type of border security. But at the end of the day, we have to look at the situation that we have before us now, and that is we have millions of undocumented individuals living in the United States. What are we going to do with them? You're right. Are we going to send them all back? There's no way that we can do that. It's cost prohibitive to do that. So why not sit and have a conversation as what is the process that we work on? Why don't we work on a process of maybe if it's not all the way a pathway to citizenship, but a pathway to legalization and making sure that they can stay and work and take care of their families, and then maybe in the future find another pathway as to how they can be legalized. But I'll tell you, one of the big conversations or elephant in the rooms that exist, is, there is a population out there, a minority although, that it's these individuals that are here undocumented who have committed crimes. I think when you poll and you talk to anyone in this room, there's no room for us, those individuals should be sent back. There's no room for us in our society for the individuals that are out there who are here undocumented and at the same time going out and committing these heinous acts. And that's why the whole argument of sanctuary cities, without having a definition of what a sanctuary city really is, a sanctuary city isn't a place where individuals who are committing crimes are going to continue to commit crimes and stay there, and law enforcement isn't going to do anything about that. That's where that narrative has to change, because that's not what a sanctuary city is all about. But when we have those conversations and you hear sanctuary cities, that's the first thing that we think about. Oh, that's where undocumented criminals are going and living there because nothing's going to happen to them. And that's just not the case. At the end of the day, is ensuring that we have a system in place and have a dialogue so we can have a pathway so these individuals can stay here. Whatever terminology you want to use, pathway to citizenship or pathway to residency, or a pathway to legal status, so they don't have to live in fear and come out of the shadows and live a productive life and raise their families and contribute to the tax base and to the society that we so much cherish.
Well, you know,
Closing thought?
one thing that we have seen as a task force, we met with the federal counterparts in Mexico City on the issue of immigration. And one of the issues that came out while we were there was that we have 200,000 American U.S. citizen children whose parents have moved back. They were either deported or chose to go back. And now they're in Mexico, and these kids don't speak Spanish. They've been trained here. We've educated them. We've spent money on them. Think about what we could do with 200,000 kids here in this country, whether it's on tech jobs or to fill jobs, and yet we now have lost that because they're now in Mexico. The Mexico government doesn't have bilingual teachers to be able to teach them, so they're going to lose what they've learned here unless something can happen where we can get them to learn this other language so that they could continue their education. But it's just a big loss for us here to have these kids that are U.S. citizens that aren't even here because their parents can't be here.
Well, we could continue this conversation for a long time, and it's been absolutely a fascinating conversation. You've got a conference to get back to. But I want to just thank each of you for this conversation. I think it's very helpful. We hear the public, we hear the national debate so loudly. And to be able to get the experiences of states and to see what the consequences are in states and how states are creatively dealing with a difficult hand, as you've pointed out, is really, I think, a very important conversation. And I want to thank each of you for being here, and good luck with your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.